Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. I bet a lot of you out there listening have thought, man, I'd love to make a game, right?
I know I have.
Well, good news, because that's what we're diving into today. Getting into game dev, all the different careers and how to actually make it happen. We've got this awesome simulated podcast script about game dev careers to dig into.
Oh, cool.
And let me tell you, this thing is packed with info. Like, did you know there are way more jobs than just coding involved?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, programming is like the foundation,
Right.
but there's a whole universe of other roles that, honestly, I never even thought about.
It really is a whole ecosystem. A lot of folks think game development starts and ends with programming.
Right. But it's like, to make a game like, say, Elden Ring, you need way more than just code, right?
Helgering. Yeah, it's a good example. Think about that huge open world. Every single detail of that environment was designed by somebody.
Oh, wow.
Environment artists, level designers, even people who make sure the physics of the world work right.
Hold up. Environment artists. I mean, I knew they had artists, but it's that specialized.
Absolutely. You've got your character artists, too, bringing those iconic heroes and villains to life, from like initial sketches all the way to those detailed 3D models you see in the game.
So programmers make the systems, and then you've got artists for like the look of the world and the characters. But then what about the story, the dialogue, all that stuff that actually makes you care about what's happening?
You're talking about the realm of narrative designers and game writers now.
Wait, those are different things. I thought that was all just one job.
Nope. Two distinct but super important roles.
So what's the difference then?
Okay, so think of the narrative designer like the architect of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
They figure out the overall plot, the big moments, the choices players will make, and then the game writer comes in. They're like the novelists.
I get it.
They take that framework from the narrative designer and they flesh it out. They write all the dialogue, the backstories for the characters, all those little environmental details that really pull you into the game's world.
Wow, so there's like layers to it. It's like, I always knew good writing was important in games,
Yeah.
but I never thought about how many different people are involved in making that happen.
And let's not forget the voice actors. They breathe life into those words. In games nowadays, performances are just as crucial as they are in movies or TV.
Oh, totally. Like in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Exactly. Those actors are phenomenal. They draw you right into those characters' lives.
This is making me want to go back and play Red Dead all over again.
You should!
But, okay, there's more to it than just the visuals and story, right? The script mentions something about sound design.
Ah, yes. Sound design.
It seems like one of those things people don't really think about unless it's bad.
Right, but honestly, it can make or break a game. Can you imagine playing a horror game without all those creepy ambient sounds?
Or a racing game without the engine roaring.
Yeah, exactly. Sound is so important for setting the atmosphere, building tension, even giving players clues about what's going on. And then you have the composers creating the music on top of that, scoring those epic battles or setting the mood for a scene.
Man, that's a lot of people working together. It's way more like filmmaking than I ever realized.
It really is a huge collaborative effort. And keeping all those pieces moving smoothly, that's where producers come in.
Producers? Okay.
They're like the unsung heroes.
But what do they actually do? To me, that always seemed like kind of a vague job.
They're basically project managers. They handle the budget, keep things on schedule, make sure all the different teams are talking to each other. It's a high-pressure role.
Wow, yeah.
You need amazing organizational skills, and you got to be able to wrangle all those creative personalities.
I guess it's like they're the conductor of an orchestra, right? Everyone playing their part at the right time.
Perfect analogy. And while we're on the topic of making sure things run smoothly, we can't leave out the QA testers.
Ah, yeah, the bug hunters.
Yep, they're the ones who play the game over and over and over, trying to break it, find any glitches. It's their job to make sure the final product is polished and ready to go.
They probably save us from a lot of frustration, huh?
Oh, for sure. They're essential. Remember that crazy glitch in Cyberpunk 2077? The one where cars would just, like, fly into the air?
Oh, yeah.
QA testers are there to try and catch those kinds of things before they make it into the game we play.
I feel like you'd have to have a certain kind of personality for that, though, right? Someone who actually likes finding flaws.
Definitely. It takes a certain kind of person.
Eh.
But honestly, hearing about all these different roles, it's clear there's a place for all sorts of talents and personalities in this industry.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about it, right? It's like this blend of art, technology, storytelling,
You need creative people, analytical people.
all working together to make something amazing. Okay, so say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, all right, I'm in. How do I get started? Is a computer science degree like absolutely necessary?
Well, a formal education in game development or computer science, even art, it can definitely give you a good foundation.
Okay.
But it's not the only way in anymore.
Sure.
This script really emphasizes building a solid portfolio. It's how you show potential employers what you can do.
Right, because in the end, it's not about what you know,
Right.
it's what you can actually create. But what kind of portfolio are we talking about here? What if I'm not a programmer?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. It all depends on what role you want. Your portfolio could be anything from game prototypes you've built to concept art you've drawn, even level designs you've created using free software.
I think that's where people get intimidated, though.
I agree.
They hear portfolio and they think that they need to have, like, shipped a full game already.
That's totally a myth. It's really about showing off your skills, your passion. Even small projects can be valuable, like
Mhm.
mods for existing games
Right.
or participating in game jams.
Wait, what are game jams? I've heard of those, but I don't really know what they are.
Oh, they're super cool. Basically, it's an event where a bunch of developers, could be aspiring or pro, get together and try to make a whole game in a super short amount of time, like a weekend, maybe just a few days.
Wow, that's intense.
It's intense, but it's really collaborative. It's a great way to learn and meet people.
So it's like a creative pressure cooker. You get a theme or something and you have to make a game from scratch.
Exactly. And the best part is, there's not as much pressure to make it perfect. It's about trying new things, pushing your limits, and learning from everyone else there. There are game jams for all skill levels, so you shouldn't be afraid to jump in.
That's amazing. It's like a little microcosm of the whole game dev world, right? You
Yeah.
got programmers, artists, sound designers, everyone's got to work together.
Exactly. Plus, you come out of it with something to add to your portfolio, and you make connections with other people who love games.
That's awesome. All right, so you've built up some skills, maybe done a few game jams, and you're working on your portfolio. But how do you actually get a job in this industry?
Well, the game developer in this simulated podcast gives some great advice about that. He said, stay curious, keep experimenting, and never stop learning. And I think that's key.
It makes sense, right? The industry is always changing, new technology is popping up all the time. Games are always evolving. You have to be able to keep up.
Exactly. It's not about knowing everything right now. It's about being eager to learn, being able to grow with the industry. And honestly, you got to find ways to have fun along the way.
That's so interesting. We're talking about a career here, a competitive industry, but the advice is to make sure you're enjoying yourself.
It's true. In the end, passion is what drives this whole industry. People who love games, love making them, love seeing what's possible.
That's a good point. If you're not having fun, it's going to show in your work.
Definitely.
Oh,
So
good.
as we keep going in this deep dive, remember that. We'll be looking at more specific paths, resources, even what the future might hold for aspiring game devs.
This is already so inspiring. I hope everyone listening is feeling it too. Before we jump into all that, though, what stood out to you so far in this script? What's grabbed your attention?
You know, what really strikes me about this script is how it kind of blows up that whole idea that there's only one way to get into game development.
Yeah, that's refreshing. It's like we always hear those stories about, the developer who dropped out of college and made their first hit game in their basement.
Exactly. And it's cool for you thinking about getting into the field because there's a lot more focus now on building that portfolio,
Yeah.
showing what you can do, whatever your skills are.
So it's not like if you're a writer, you're automatically out of luck just because you can't code.
Not at all. If you love writing, you can totally dive into narrative design or game writing. There are tons of resources online where you can learn about things like, branching dialogue systems or how to write compelling characters.
Oh, that stuff's right up my alley. But I guess even within that world, there are different specialties, right? Like writing for a huge RPG is probably way different than writing for a fast-paced action game.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to figure out what kind of games you're really drawn to. Do you love those intricate plots with multiple endings? Or is it more about snappy dialogue in the middle of all the action?
You know what this reminds me of? Those choose your own adventure books I used to read as a kid. Is that like a basic version of branching dialogue?
Kind of. It's a simplified version for sure.
Yeah.
But in games, those choices the player makes, they can have huge consequences. They shape the story, the gameplay, everything.
Wow.
And that's where a skilled writer comes in. They got to make sure those choices actually feel meaningful and that the dialogue stays engaging no matter what path the player takes.
That's definitely something I'm going to have to research more later. But okay, let's say I'm more of a visual person. What kind of portfolio do I need if I want to get into the art side of things?
Well, for artists, the portfolio is everything. You want to show off your concept art skills, your ability to design cool characters, maybe some environment pieces too.
So it's not just about drawing a cool picture.
No, it's more than that. You got to show that you get how art works in a game.
Right.
Like a character concept, it's not just a static image. It needs to show the character's personality, their role in the game, maybe even hint at their backstory. And you have to communicate all of that visually.
That's where the 3D modeling skills come in, right? Taking that 2D concept and making it into something that can move around in the game world.
You got it. And there are even more specializations within that. Character modeling, environments, even weapons and props.
Man, my head's spinning. There are so many possibilities. But, okay, how do you actually learn all this stuff? Is a degree the only way?
Well, a formal education, like you said, can be a great way to learn. It gives you structure, you meet professionals.
Right.
But these days, there are so many amazing resources online. Tutorials, courses, entire communities built around game dev.
Yeah, but there's so much out there. It's overwhelming. How do you know what's actually good?
That's fair. You definitely have to do your research, look for courses taught by people who've actually worked in the industry, read reviews, try out free resources before you commit to a paid program.
This is where I think those game jams could be really helpful, right? Kind of like a trial by fire, where you can test your skills and learn from other people in a real setting.
Exactly. Don't underestimate the power of networking either. Go to industry events, join online forums, connect with developers on social media. It's all valuable.
Okay, so let's say I've got a decent portfolio, I've done some game jams, and I'm starting to meet people. How do I actually approach a studio and say, hey, hire me?
Well, this is where you have to tailor your approach.
I see.
Do your research, figure out which studios make games you admire, what kind of positions they have open, and then write a cover letter and resume that show why you would be a good fit.
So don't just send out the same generic application to everyone.
Nope. Show them you've done your homework, you know their games, you're passionate about what they do.
This is making me think about that advice we talked about earlier. Stay curious, keep experimenting, and never stop learning. It's like, that's not just about your skills, it's about staying on top of the whole industry.
Yeah. This industry never sits still, so you got to stay ahead of the curve. Like, think about VR and AR, right?
Virtual and augmented reality, yeah.
That's opening up tons of new possibilities for game development.
VR has always seemed so cool to me.
It's definitely the next frontier, but I can see how it'd feel a little intimidating too.
Well, yeah. I mean, wouldn't you need a whole new set of skills to make VR games?
There are definitely new challenges and new opportunities, but the fundamentals of game design, storytelling, creating those immersive experiences, that stuff still applies.
True.
And there are already tons of resources and communities popping up around VR and AR development.
So even if you're just starting out now, it's worth looking into.
Absolutely, especially if it's something you're interested in. This industry rewards people who are adaptable, who embrace new tech, who are always learning.
This whole deep dive has really changed my perspective. I used to think game development was super technical, almost impossible to break into.
I know what you mean.
But now it feels like there are so many ways to get involved no matter what your background is.
And that's what's so exciting about it, right? The world of game dev is huge. It's constantly changing, and there's a place for everyone.
But like the script said, it's also about finding your people. Connecting with other folks who love games just as much as you do.
Yeah. Those connections, they can make all the difference. And who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one giving advice, sharing your story, and inspiring the next generation of game devs.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive for today. But like we've been saying, this is really just the start of your journey.
We've given you a lot to think about, but now it's time to take action.
So as you start exploring this world, think about the advice that really resonated with you today.
Maybe it was about building that killer portfolio. Or maybe it was about being brave enough to try new things and stay curious.
Or maybe it was just remembering to have fun while you're doing it all.
Whatever it is, hold on to that inspiration and let it guide you as you take those first steps.
And hey, who knows, maybe someday we'll be playing a game that you helped make. Until then, keep playing, keep learning, keep dreaming.
It really is.
So anyone out there listening who's feeling fired up and ready to dive in, what's like the one piece of advice you'd give them?
You know, it might sound simple, but I'd say just start doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's easy to get stuck in that planning stage, doing all the research and stuff.
Right.
But at some point, you just got to roll up your sleeves and actually start creating something.
You gotta. All this stuff we've been talking about, portfolios, game jams, it's not going to happen on its own. You have to actually go out there and make it happen.
Be willing to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. And that's where the fun comes back in. Don't get so caught up in making everything perfect that you forget why you love games in the first place.
This is making me think about all the cool stuff happening in the indie game scene these
Oh
days.
yeah, it's amazing.
There are so many developers out there making these really unique personal games that are pushing the boundaries of what a game can be.
It's incredible how much creativity is out there.
Yeah.
And it's easier than ever to actually create and share your own games.
You don't necessarily need a big studio or a ton of money to make it happen.
You don't. Passion and a good idea can go a long way. Like, look at a game like Stardew Valley. That was made by one person.
It's true. And it became this huge global hit. So even if someone's not sure if they want to do game dev as a full-time career, they can still just explore and have fun with it.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that'll turn into something more down the line.
This whole conversation has really been eye-opening for me. I had this idea in my head that game development was this super technical, exclusive thing.
I get it.
But now it feels like there are so many ways to get involved, no matter what your background is.
And that's what I hope you take away from this deep dive. The world of game dev is huge, and there's a place for you in it.
But like the script emphasized, it's also about finding your people, connecting with other game devs who get you, who can support you and inspire you.
Absolutely. Those connections are so valuable. And who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one giving advice on a podcast, sharing your journey, and inspiring a whole new generation of game developers.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. But like we've been saying throughout this whole conversation, this is really just the beginning.
Yeah, we've given you a lot to think about, but now it's time for you to take that next step.
So think about the advice that really resonated with you today. Maybe it was about building that portfolio. Maybe it was about embracing new technologies. Or maybe it was just about remembering to have fun along the way.
Hold on to that inspiration and let it guide you as you start exploring this awesome world of game development.
And hey, who knows, maybe someday we'll be playing a game that you helped create. Until then, keep playing, keep learning, and keep dreaming big.